The half-wild shepherd mix had already sent 3 ranch hands to the doctor with deep puncture wounds when Beatrice Whitfield stepped off the afternoon stage in Jackson, Wyoming. Her leather satchel clutched tight against her traveling dress, dust coating her auburn hair like powdered sugar on a cake. It was late May of 1884, and the mountain valley still held pockets of snow in the shadowed places where sunlight never quite reached, though the meadows burst with wildflowers that seemed to stretch all the way to the Teton peaks, rising like cathedral spires against the crystalline sky. She had come from Philadelphia with precisely $47 to her name, a letter of introduction from a rancher's widow she had nursed through pneumonia, and absolutely nowhere else to go after her father's gambling debts had consumed everything her family once possessed. The Broken Arrow Ranch sat 12 miles north of town, accessible only by a rutted wagon road that wound through sage-covered hills and stands of aspen that shimmered silver-green in the mountain breeze. Beatrice hired a wagon driven by an elderly man who introduced himself simply as Dutch, and he talked the entire journey about the ranch and its troubles, seeming grateful for a captive audience. "That dog showed up about 2 months back," Dutch explained, guiding his team around a particularly deep rut. "Just appeared one morning, half-starved, ribs showing through his fur like piano keys. Warren Van Horn, he is the foreman, tried to feed the creature and nearly lost his thumb for the kindness. The animal is beautiful, make no mistake, got those pale blue eyes that look right through a man's soul, but there is something broken inside him. Every hand on that ranch has tried to gentle him, and every single one has bled for it." "Why not just shoot him?" Beatrice asked, though the thought made her stomach twist. She had always possessed a soft heart for wounded things, whether they walked on 2 legs or 4. Dutch shook his head, his weathered face creasing into deep lines. "Warren will not allow it. Says the dog deserves a chance, that whatever made him mean was not the animal's fault. The boss, old Samuel Carson, he is losing patience, though. Gave Warren until the end of this week to either gentle that beast or put him down. That is 5 more days, and I do not figure any man on that ranch can work a miracle in 5 days." The ranch house came into view as they crested a rise, a sprawling structure of pine logs with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings that spoke of prosperity and careful management. Cattle dotted the valley floor, their red hides bright against the new grass, and horses grazed in a pasture where colts kicked up their heels in the afternoon warmth. It should have been a peaceful scene, but Beatrice could hear the barking before Dutch even pulled the wagon to a stop, a frantic, savage sound that raised the hair on her arms. A man emerged from the barn, and Beatrice felt something shift in her chest, like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a face that might have been carved from the mountains themselves. All strong lines and sharp angles softened only by a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His left hand was wrapped in fresh bandages, and he carried himself with the careful movements of someone in pain but too stubborn to acknowledge it. "You must be Miss Whitfield," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Beatrice's bones. "I am Warren Van Horn. Welcome to Broken Arrow." "Thank you, Mr. Van Horn." Beatrice accepted his help down from the wagon, noting the warmth of his unbandaged hand, the calluses that spoke of hard work, the way his gray eyes held hers for just a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I understand you have need of a housekeeper." "That we do." Warren released her hand and stepped back, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow felt like a wall between them. "Old Mrs. Chen retired last month, went to live with her daughter in San Francisco. The men have been doing their best, but cooking and cleaning are not exactly their strong suits. Boss said to offer you $40 a month plus room and board. The work is hard, the hours are long, and you will be the only woman on a ranch with 11 men, though I give you my word you will be treated with nothing but respect. The barking intensified and Warren's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his tanned skin. Beatrice turned toward the sound, saw the dog pacing in a reinforced pen near the horse barn, a magnificent animal with a thick coat of gray and white, those startling blue eyes Dutch had mentioned, and lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could easily tear through flesh and bone. But what caught her attention was not the aggression, it was the terror underneath it, the way the dog moved like a creature expecting a blow at any moment, the way he kept his body low and his ears flat against his skull. "He is afraid," Beatrice said softly. Warren made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. "That dog is a lot of things, Miss Whitfield, but afraid is not one of them. He is pure mean, through and through." "No." Beatrice set down her satchel and moved toward the pen, ignoring Warren's sharp intake of breath. "Fear often looks like anger in animals, and in people for that matter. Someone hurt him very badly, and now he believes every human hand will bring pain." "Miss Whitfield, stop." Warren caught her arm, his touch gentle but firm. "That animal has bitten 7 people in 8 weeks. He will tear you apart." Beatrice looked up at him, really looked, and saw the same fear she recognized in the dog reflected in Warren's eyes, buried deep beneath layers of control and responsibility and whatever walls he had built around his heart. "Have you eaten today, Mr. Van Horn?" The question clearly caught him off guard. "What does that have to do with anything? Your hand is injured, you are moving like your ribs hurt, and you have dark circles under your eyes that suggest you have not slept properly in days. You have been trying to save that dog at the expense of your own well-being, which tells me you see something of yourself in him." Beatrice kept her voice matter of fact, the same tone she had used with her nursing patients. "So I will ask again. Have you eaten today?" Warren released her arm and stepped back, something like shock passing across his features before his expression closed down again. "I had coffee this morning. That is not food." Beatrice picked up her satchel and turned toward the house. "I will prepare dinner for your men, Mr. Van Horn, and then tomorrow morning we will discuss the dog. I have 5 days, according to Dutch's calculations, and I intend to use every minute." She did not wait for his response, just walked up the porch steps with her spine straight and her heart hammering against her ribs, aware of his gaze following her every step. The house was in better condition than she had expected, though it bore the unmistakable signs of men living without a woman's touch. Dishes stacked haphazardly by the sink, floors that needed sweeping, windows clouded with months of accumulated dust. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a massive iron stove that made her Philadelphia apartment's cooking setup look like a child's toy. Beatrice had learned to cook out of necessity after her mother died when she was 16, and she had discovered a talent for taking simple ingredients and transforming them into something that brought comfort and satisfaction. She found venison in the cold cellar, along with potatoes, carrots, onions, and a shelf of preserved goods that suggested Mrs. Chen had been an organized woman. By the time the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Beatrice had a stew bubbling on the stove and fresh biscuits browning in the oven. The men came in at sunset, a rough collection of cowboys and ranch hands who ranged in age from barely 20 to well past 50, all of them stopping in their tracks when they saw Beatrice standing by the stove. She served them efficiently, noting their surprise when the food proved not just edible but genuinely good, watching the way Warren sat at the head of the table and ate mechanically, his mind clearly elsewhere, his bandaged hand resting unused in his lap. After the men had returned to the bunkhouse, Warren lingered in the kitchen, watching Beatrice wash dishes in the big ceramic sink. "That was the best meal I have had since Mrs. Chen left," he said quietly. "Thank you. You are welcome." Beatrice scrubbed at a stubborn pot, very aware of his presence behind her, the way he seemed to fill the room with something she could not quite name. "Tell me about the dog, Mr. Van Horn. Everything from the beginning." Warren sighed, and she heard him pull out a chair, the wood scraping against the floor. "He showed up on the 1st of April, half dead from starvation and something else, some injury to his spirit we could not see. I should have known better than to approach him right away, but he looked so pitiful lying there by the water trough. I brought him food, and he took off 3 layers of skin from my forearm. Doc Henry had to stitch me up." "But you tried again," Beatrice said, not a question. "I did. Every day for a week, I would bring food and set it just outside his reach, then back away. Eventually he started eating, but he would not let anyone get close. The other men tried too, figured if we all worked together we could rope him and force him to accept handling. That is when he really started biting. Tommy Reeves needed 12 stitches in his calf. Billy Morton nearly lost 3 fingers. And yesterday, when I tried one more time to get a lead on him, he got my hand." Warren's voice went flat. "Boss says if the dog is not gentle by Sunday, he will be shot. And I cannot argue with that decision anymore, not when men are getting hurt." Beatrice dried her hands and turned to face him, leaning against the sink. Warren looked exhausted in the lamplight, the shadows under his eyes even more pronounced, his shoulders carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for one man to bear. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because I used to be just like him." The words came out rough, like they had been torn from somewhere deep inside. 8 years ago, I came back from a cattle drive to find my ranch burned, my wife dead, killed by raiders who were never caught. I was so full of rage I could not see straight. I drank, I fought. I did everything I could to make the pain stop, and nothing worked. Samuel Carson found me half dead in an alley in Cheyenne and brought me here, gave me a job when no one else would, gave me a reason to keep breathing. That dog deserves the same chance I got." Beatrice's heart ached for him, for the loss that still lived in his eyes, for the lonely years she could see written in the set of his shoulders. "I am sorry for your loss, Mr. Van Horn. And I promise you, I will do everything I can to help that dog, but you need to rest. Your hand needs time to heal, and you cannot help anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. I will rest when this is settled." Warren stood, and for a moment he swayed slightly, catching himself on the back of the chair. "Thank you again for dinner, Miss Whitfield. Your room is upstairs, first door on the right. If you need anything, I am in the foreman's cabin just past the barn." He left before she could respond, and Beatrice stood in the quiet kitchen listening to his boots on the porch steps, the soft closing of the door, and wondered how a man could carry so much pain and still function. She finished cleaning, checked the stove, and climbed the stairs to her room, a simple space with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. She could see the dog's pen from here, see the animal still pacing in the moonlight, and she made a silent promise that she would not let him die. Morning came early on a ranch, the sky just beginning to lighten when Beatrice woke to the sound of men's voices and horses nickering for their breakfast. She dressed quickly in her oldest work dress, pinned her hair into a practical bun, and went downstairs to start breakfast. The men were surprised to find eggs, bacon, and hot coffee waiting when they came in, and even more surprised when Beatrice announced she would be working with the dog starting immediately after she finished her morning chores. "Miss Whitfield, I do not think that is wise," Warren said, his voice carrying a note of authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed. "That animal is dangerous, so you have said." Beatrice poured him more coffee, noting he had not touched his bandaged hand since sitting down. "Nevertheless, I intend to try. Unless you are planning to stop me." Their eyes met across the table and something passed between them, a challenge and an acknowledgement and something else that made Beatrice's pulse quicken. Warren looked away first. "Do what you think is best, Miss Whitfield. But stay outside the pen, and yell if you need help." The dog watched her approach with those eerie blue eyes, his lips already pulling back in a warning snarl. Beatrice ignored the fear singing along her nerves and settled herself on an overturned bucket about 10 feet from the pen, close enough to be noticed, but far enough to not be an immediate threat. She had brought a book with her, one of the few possessions she had not sold to pay her father's debts, and she opened it and began to read aloud. The dog barked for the first 20 minutes, a constant assault of sound designed to drive her away. Beatrice kept reading, her voice steady and calm, not looking directly at him but aware of every movement, every shift in his posture. After an hour the barking stopped, though the dog continued to pace, his body tense and ready to attack. After 2 hours he sat down, though he did not take his eyes off her. Beatrice kept reading. Warren came by at noon, carrying a plate of the leftover biscuits and some cheese. "You have been out here for 4 hours," he said, and there was something in his voice that might have been admiration. "He has not tried to bite you yet, which is progress." "He is listening," Beatrice said, accepting the food gratefully. "I can see it in the way he tilts his head. He is trying to understand why I am not hurting him." Warren crouched down beside her, and the dog immediately surged to his feet, growling low in his throat. "He knows me, knows I am the one who keeps trying to touch him." "He is afraid of men," Beatrice observed. "Whoever hurt him was male. I would wager my last dollar on it." "You said he appeared in early April. That is still cold in these mountains. What if he escaped from someone who was keeping him chained or caged, someone who beat him? Then that someone deserves to be shot." Warren's voice went hard, and Beatrice saw his unbandaged hand curl into a fist. "I have seen what men can do to animals when they think no one is watching. Makes me sick." They sat in companionable silence for a while, and Beatrice found herself very aware of Warren's nearness, the way his shoulder nearly brushed hers, the scent of leather and soap, and something indefinably male that made her stomach flutter. She had been courted before, back in Philadelphia, by young men who saw only her pretty face and never bothered to look deeper, who disappeared the moment her father's financial troubles became public knowledge. Warren was different. Warren looked at her like she mattered, like her thoughts and opinions carried weight. "Why did you really come west?" Warren asked suddenly. "Philadelphia is a long way from Wyoming." Beatrice considered lying, but something about the openness in his gray eyes made her want to be honest. "My father died 3 months ago, leaving debts that consumed everything we owned. I was engaged to a lawyer who promised he would stand by me, but he broke the engagement the day after the funeral and married a banker's daughter 2 weeks later. I had a choice between becoming a burden to distant relatives or making my own way. I chose the latter." "His loss," Warren said, so quietly she almost missed it. "The lawyer, I mean. He gave up someone extraordinary." Heat flooded Beatrice's cheeks, and she looked down at her book, unable to meet his gaze. "You barely know me, Mr. Van Horn. I know you are brave enough to travel halfway across the country alone. I know you see wounded things and want to heal them instead of destroying them. I know you have been sitting in the dirt for 4 hours trying to save a dog everyone else has given up on." Warren stood, brushing dust from his pants. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Miss Whitfield." He walked away before she could respond, and Beatrice sat there with her heart pounding and her mind spinning, wondering how a man she had met less than 24 hours ago could already feel essential to her continued existence. She forced herself to focus on the dog, who had relaxed slightly now that Warren had left, his body losing some of its rigid tension. "He is a good man," Beatrice told the dog conversationally. "Wounded like you, but good underneath it all. I think perhaps we are all three of us carrying scars from the past, and maybe that is why we can understand each other." The dog's ears twitched forward just slightly, and Beatrice felt a surge of triumph. Progress, small but real. She spent the entire day by the pen, reading until her voice went hoarse, then simply sitting in silence, letting the dog grow accustomed to her presence. When the dinner bell rang, she reluctantly stood, her legs stiff from hours of sitting. The dog watched her go, and unless she was imagining things, he looked almost disappointed. Dinner was a lively affair, the men more talkative now that they had accepted her presence, sharing stories about their day and teasing each other with the easy camaraderie of people who worked together and trusted each other with their lives. Beatrice found herself laughing at their jokes, feeling more at home than she had in months, maybe years. Warren sat at the head of the table, participating less than the others but watching everything with those observant gray eyes, his gaze returning to Beatrice again and again, until she felt like she was burning up from the inside out. After dinner, she went out to the porch to cool off, and Warren followed, settling into the chair beside hers without asking permission. The mountains were black silhouettes against a sky full of stars, more stars than Beatrice had ever seen in Philadelphia, where city lights dimmed the heavens. "You did well today," Warren said. "The dog actually looked calm by the time you left. That is more progress than we have made in 2 months. He needs time," Beatrice replied, "and patience, and someone who will not give up on him. Like I said, we only have until Sunday." Warren's voice carried a weight of sadness. 4 more days. Then I will make them count." Beatrice turned to look at him, this man who had somehow slipped past her defenses in the space of a single day. "May I ask you something personal, Mr. Van Horn?" "Warren," he corrected. "And yes. Do you think you will ever let yourself be happy again? Or are you planning to carry your grief forever?" The question hung in the air between them. And for a long moment Beatrice thought she had overstepped, that Warren would stand up and walk away and never speak to her again. But instead, he leaned back in his chair and looked up at the stars. "I did not think I deserved happiness after Margaret died," he said quietly. "I was supposed to protect her, and I failed. For 8 years, I have been going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And then yesterday you stepped off that wagon, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt something other than guilt and grief. It terrified me." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. "What did you feel?" "Hope." Warren turned his head to look at her, and even in the darkness she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I felt hope, Beatrice, and I do not know what to do with that." Hearing her given name in his rough voice did something to Beatrice's insides, made her feel simultaneously strong and fragile, brave and terrified. "You could start by accepting that Margaret would not want you to spend the rest of your life alone. You could allow yourself to believe that you deserve a second chance, just like you believe that dog deserves one. And if I fail again," Warren's voice went raw, "if I let myself care about someone and lose them too, then you will hurt," Beatrice said honestly. "But at least you will have lived, truly lived, instead of just existing. Is not that worth the risk? Warren stood abruptly and moved to the porch railing, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. Beatrice gave him space, understanding that she had pushed him to an edge he might not be ready to cross. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she had to strain to hear him. I think you might be the bravest person I have ever met, Beatrice Whitfield. I am not brave, Beatrice said, standing and moving to join him at the railing. I am just tired of being afraid, tired of letting fear dictate my choices. Life is too short and too precious to waste on what ifs and maybes. Warren turned to face her, and suddenly he was very close, close enough that she could see the silver threads in his dark hair, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his eyes had darkened with something that made her pulse race. Beatrice, he said, her name a question and a prayer. Yes, she answered, though she was not entirely sure what she was agreeing to, only knowing that she wanted this, wanted him, wanted whatever fragile thing was building between them. Warren lifted his unbandaged hand and cupped her face, his palm warm and rough against her skin, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. I have not kissed anyone since Margaret died, he whispered. I do not know if I remember how. I think it is like riding a horse, Beatrice said, her voice shaking slightly. Your body remembers even when your mind thinks it has forgotten. He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger and lighter and almost unbearably handsome. And then he was kissing her, his lips warm and soft and slightly hesitant, like he was afraid she might break. Beatrice pressed closer, her hands coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering as hard as her own, and kissed him back with all the loneliness and longing she had carried since leaving Philadelphia. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. This is happening very fast, he said, sounding dazed. Yes, Beatrice agreed. Is that a problem? I do not know. Warren pulled back slightly, his hand still cradling her face. I do not want to rush you, Beatrice. You just arrived yesterday, and you are in a vulnerable position here, the only woman on a ranch full of men, dependent on this job. I do not want you to feel pressured. I do not feel pressured. Beatrice covered his hand with hers. I feel like I have been walking through fog for months, and you are the first solid thing I have found. But Warren, I need you to understand something. I will not be your second choice. If we pursue this, whatever this is, you need to be fully present. Not comparing me to Margaret, not holding back pieces of yourself because you are afraid. Can you do that? Warren was silent for a long moment, and Beatrice held her breath, prepared for rejection, prepared for him to say it was too much too soon. But instead, he said, I can try. I cannot promise I will be perfect at it, but I can promise I will try. Is that enough? Yes, Beatrice said simply. That is enough. They stood together on the porch for a while longer, not talking, just being, and Beatrice felt something settle in her chest, something that felt remarkably like peace. Eventually, the night air grew cold enough that she started shivering, and Warren insisted she go inside, though she noticed he waited on the porch until she had climbed the stairs and closed her bedroom door. The second day passed much like the first, with Beatrice spending long hours by the dog's pen, reading and talking and simply being present. The dog grew gradually more comfortable with her proximity, until by afternoon he was lying down while she read, his head on his paws, those blue eyes watching her with something less than outright hostility. Warren came by several times throughout the day, ostensibly to check on her welfare, but really, Beatrice suspected, just to be near her. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of their pasts like precious gifts, learning the shapes of each other's hurts and hopes. "I wanted children," Warren admitted during one of these visits, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "Margaret and I tried for 3 years, but it never happened. And now I am 34 years old, and I wonder if that chance is gone forever." 34 is not old, Beatrice said. "My mother had my youngest brother when she was 38. "And you?" Warren asked. "Did you want children?" "I do," Beatrice said carefully. "Someday, with the right person in the right circumstances. I am only 24, I have time." Warren's expression shifted, something painful and hungry crossing his features. 10 years between us. That is significant." "My parents were 12 years apart," Beatrice countered. "And they had a very happy marriage until my mother died. Age is just a number, Warren. What matters is whether two people fit together, whether they want the same things, whether they are willing to work through difficulties." "And what do you want, Beatrice?" Warren turned to look at her fully. "Beyond saving the dog, beyond this job, what do you want from life?" Beatrice considered the question, thought about the answers she would have given 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. "I want to matter," she said finally. "I want to be more than decorative, more than someone's daughter or someone's wife or someone's housekeeper. I want to do work that means something, to help creatures who cannot help themselves, to build something lasting. And I want to be loved, truly loved, not for my face or my cooking or my usefulness, but for who I am in my soul. Is that too much to ask?" "No," Warren said, his voice rough with emotion. "That is not too much at all. In fact, I think those might be the most reasonable demands I have ever heard." On the third day, Beatrice brought her lunch to the pen and ate where the dog could see her, making no move to share her food or to approach him. The dog watched every bite with intense focus, his nose working, clearly interested but unwilling to come closer. When Beatrice finished eating, she set a piece of dried meat on the ground about halfway between herself and the pen, then returned to her seat and resumed reading. It took an hour, but eventually the dog crept forward, his belly low to the ground, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face. He snatched the meat and retreated to the far corner of the pen, gulping it down like he expected someone to steal it from him. Beatrice did not react, just kept reading, and after a few minutes the dog ventured closer again, emboldened by her stillness. Warren arrived to find the dog sitting less than 6 feet from Beatrice, outside the pen but voluntarily near, his posture still wary but no longer actively aggressive. "Dear Lord," Warren breathed. "How did you do that?" "Patience," Beatrice said simply, "and respect for his boundaries. He is starting to understand that I will not hurt him, that my presence means safety rather than pain." "You are a miracle worker," Warren said, and there was such admiration in his voice that Beatrice felt heat flood her cheeks. That evening after dinner, Warren asked if Beatrice would like to go for a walk. They strolled through the twilight, past the barns and corrals, down to a small creek that ran through the property, its water bright and cold from mountain snowmelt. Warren found a fallen log and they sat, shoulders touching, watching the water burble over smooth stones. "I have been thinking about what you said," Warren began, his voice tentative, "about deserving a second chance, and I realized something. I have been so focused on what I lost that I never considered what I might gain. You have changed that, Beatrice. In 3 days, you have made me want to live again, not just survive." Beatrice's heart swelled until she thought it might burst. "You have done the same for me, Warren. I came here expecting to be just another employee, just someone passing through, but you make me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life." Warren took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I know it is too soon to make promises. I know we need more time to be certain. But Beatrice, I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It is not loneliness or desperation or some misguided attempt to replace what I lost. It is you, specifically you, and the way you make me believe the world can be beautiful again. Warren. Beatrice turned to face him, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek. I feel the same way, and I know it is too fast, and I know it is probably foolish, but I do not care. I have spent too many years being careful and sensible, and where did it get me? Alone and broke and desperate. So yes, this is fast, but it also feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Warren kissed her then, less hesitant than the first time, more certain, and Beatrice melted into him, letting herself feel everything she had been holding back, all the attraction and affection and growing love that threatened to overwhelm her. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. I want to court you properly, he said. I want to do this right, Beatrice. You deserve that. Then court me, Beatrice said, smiling. Though I should warn you, I am a very demanding woman. I require regular conversations, thoughtful gestures, and at least occasional kissing. Warren laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and Beatrice realized it might have been the first time she had heard him truly laugh. I think I can manage those requirements, he said. Though the occasional kissing might turn into frequent kissing if I am not careful. I am willing to accept that risk, Beatrice said solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with mischief. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Beatrice felt like she was floating, like her feet barely touched the ground. She had come to Wyoming expecting nothing more than a job and a fresh start, and instead she had found something infinitely more precious. Hope, purpose, and quite possibly, love. The fourth day dawned bright and clear, and Beatrice woke with a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with the dog and everything to do with the man she would see at breakfast. Warren was already at the table when she came downstairs, and the smile he gave her made her knees weak. The other men noticed, of course, but if they disapproved, they kept it to themselves, though Dutch winked at her when Warren was not looking. After breakfast, Beatrice went to the pen as usual, but this time she brought a bowl of water and fresh meat. The dog was waiting for her, and when she set the offerings down about 5 feet from the pen and retreated to her usual spot, he emerged immediately, first drinking deeply, and then eating with less desperation than he had shown before. Progress, definite progress. Today I am going to try something new, Beatrice told the dog conversationally. I am going to open the pen and see if you will come out, not to trap you or hurt you, but to give you the choice, because that is what you need most, I think. The freedom to choose whether to trust, rather than having trust forced upon you. She walked to the pen door slowly, making no sudden movements, very aware of the dog watching her every move. The latch was simple, just a loop of rope over a post, and she lifted it carefully and pushed the gate open. Then she retreated to her seat and picked up her book. The dog stared at the open gate for a long moment, clearly suspicious of this new development. Then, moving with extreme caution, he crept to the opening and peered out. Beatrice kept rating, her voice steady, though her heart hammered in her chest. If the dog ran, they might never catch him. If he attacked, she would be seriously injured before anyone could reach her. The dog took one step outside the pen, then another. Then he sat down, right in the gateway, and looked at Beatrice with what she could only describe as confusion. Good boy, Beatrice said softly. Such a good, brave boy. You can go wherever you want. No one is going to hurt you. The dog's tail moved, not quite a wag, but a slight twitch that suggested he was considering the possibility that she might be telling the truth. They stayed like that for over an hour, Beatrice reading and the dog sitting in the gateway, neither approaching nor fleeing. When Warren came by at noon, he stopped dead at the sight of the open pen. "Beatrice, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "Giving him a choice," Beatrice replied calmly. "He will not trust us until he knows he is free to leave. And if he runs, then he runs, and at least he will be free rather than shot on Sunday." Beatrice looked up at Warren. "But I do not think he will run. I think he has been looking for a home, a real home, and he is starting to believe this might be it." Warren shook his head, but he was smiling. "You are either brilliant or completely insane, and I cannot decide which." "Why not both?" Beatrice suggested lightly. The dog watched their exchange with interest, his head tilting at the sound of their voices. When Warren moved to sit beside Beatrice, the dog tensed but did not retreat. Warren held out his bandaged hand. "This is healing," he told Beatrice. "Another few days and I will have full use of it again. Doc Henry says I was lucky, that it could have been much worse." "May I see?" Beatrice asked, and when Warren extended his hand, she carefully unwrapped the bandage. The wounds were deep but clean, already beginning to scab over. She rewrapped his hand with practiced efficiency, her nursing training evident in her gentle touch. "You need to keep this clean and dry, and try not to use it too much." "Yes, madam," Warren said, the corner of his mouth quirking up. "Are you always this bossy, always?" Beatrice confirmed. "I believe in taking care of the people I care about, even when they would prefer to suffer in masculine silence." "The people you care about," Warren repeated softly. "Does that include me?" Beatrice met his eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection that probably mirrored her own. "Yes, Warren, that includes you, very much so." The dog made a soft sound, almost like a whine, and when they looked over, he had moved closer, now sitting only about 8 feet away. His body language had shifted, his ears up instead of flat, his mouth relaxed instead of tense. Warren sucked in a breath. "Can I try something?" he asked Beatrice quietly. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to lie down, flat on my back, completely vulnerable." "I read once that wolves and dogs respond to submissive postures, that it shows you are not a threat." Warren's voice was uncertain. "It is probably stupid." "It is not stupid," Beatrice said. "It is brilliant. But move slowly and let me do it first." Before Warren could argue, Beatrice set aside her book and lay back on the ground, her arms loose at her sides, her gaze on the sky rather than the dog. She heard the animal shift, sensed him moving closer, and forced herself to remain absolutely still. Warm breath huffed across her arm, and then she felt the tentative touch of a cold nose against her wrist, investigating, considering. "Good boy," Beatrice murmured, still not moving. "Such a good, brave boy." The dog sniffed up her arm to her shoulder, then along her neck, his breath warm against her skin. Beatrice held perfectly still, barely breathing, letting him explore at his own pace. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, the dog sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Warren," Beatrice said softly, "very slowly lie down on my other side." Warren moved with excruciating care, lowering himself to the ground inch by inch until he lay flat beside her. The dog tensed immediately, his body going rigid, and for a moment Beatrice thought he would bolt. But instead the animal leaned closer to her, seeking her protection, and she slowly, very slowly, lifted one hand and placed it on the dog's shoulder. The dog froze. Beatrice held her breath. And then, miracle of miracles, the dog leaned into her touch, accepting it, allowing it, and some of the rigidity left his body. "Warren," Beatrice breathed, "give me your hand, the unbandaged one." Warren extended his hand and Beatrice took it, guiding it to rest on the dog's flank. The animal flinched but did not pull away, and gradually, as Warren stroked him with gentle, careful movements, he began to relax. They lay there in the dirt for a long time, the three of them, broken things healing together, and Beatrice felt tears slide down her temples into her hair. "You did it," Warren said, his voice thick with emotion. "Dear God, Beatrice, you actually did it." "We did it," Beatrice corrected. "All three of us together." That evening, the dog followed them back to the ranch house, staying about 20 feet behind, nervous but willing. The other ranch hands stopped their work to stare in disbelief, as the animal that had terrorized them for weeks walked calmly across the yard. Warren found an old blanket and set up a bed on the porch, and the dog circled it a few times before lying down with a deep sigh, his head on his paws, finally allowing himself to rest. Beatrice prepared dinner in a daze, still processing what had happened, still marveling at the trust the dog had given them. Warren stayed close, helping her in ways that were not strictly necessary, but that gave them excuses to touch, to be near each other, to steal kisses when no one was looking. The men noticed, of course, but their approval was evident in their knowing smiles and careful absence whenever Warren and Beatrice found themselves alone. After dinner, Samuel Carson himself came by, a grizzled man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a weathered face that had seen everything the West could throw at him. He stood on the porch looking at the sleeping dog for a long moment. "Well, I will be damned," he said finally. "Warren, you said you would gentle that beast, and I did not believe you could do it. But here he is, sleeping on my porch like a house dog." "It was not me, boss," Warren said, his hand finding Beatrice's. "It was Miss Whitfield. She saw what the rest of us could not." Carson turned his shrewd gaze on Beatrice, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "Young lady, you have a gift. I have been around animals my entire life, and I have never seen anything like what you accomplished in 4 days. If you ever get tired of housekeeping, I would be pleased to have you work with our horses. We have a few difficult ones that could use your particular talents." "Thank you, sir," Beatrice said, surprised and pleased by the offer. "I will certainly consider it." After Carson left, Warren pulled Beatrice into the shadows at the end of the porch, away from curious eyes. "He is right, you know. You have a genuine gift. I have never seen anyone work with animals the way you do." "I just treated him with respect," Beatrice said, though warmth flooded through her at the praise. "That is all any creature wants, really, to be seen and valued and treated with kindness." "Like you saw me," Warren said quietly. "Like you treated me with kindness even when I was prickly and difficult." "You were grieving," Beatrice said. "You are grieving. And that is allowed, Warren. You do not have to be perfect or completely healed to be worthy of love." Warren cupped her face in both hands, his bandaged one and his unbandaged one, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her throat ache. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I know it is too soon, and I know it is probably crazy, but I love you, Beatrice Whitfield. You have brought me back to life." Joy burst through Beatrice's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much it terrifies me." They held each other as the stars came out, as the dog slept peacefully on the porch, as the ranch settled down for the night around them. And Beatrice thought that maybe, just maybe, coming to Wyoming had been the best decision she had ever made. The 5th day was Sunday, the deadline Samuel Carson had set, but it no longer mattered because the dog had been transformed. He still carried wariness in his blue eyes, still flinched at sudden movements, but he no longer bit, no longer snarled at every approach. Warren named him Storm, for his gray coat and his tumultuous past, and the dog seemed to accept the name, his ears perking up when it was called. Beatrice spent the morning working with Storm, teaching him basic commands, marveling at how quickly he learned when treated with patience and respect. Warren joined her, and together they worked as a team, their movements synchronized like they had been doing this together for years. The other men drifted over one by one, offering treats and gentle words, and Storm accepted them all, though it was clear his primary loyalty belonged to Beatrice and Warren. "He is going to be a fine working dog," Warren said, watching Storm sit on command. "I think in another week or two we could try him with the cattle." "He will be brilliant," Beatrice agreed. "He is smart and eager to please. He just needed someone to believe in him." Warren pulled her close, right there in front of God and the ranch hands and everyone, and kissed her soundly. "Like I needed someone to believe in me," he said when they broke apart. "Beatrice, I have a question to ask you, and I know it is far too soon, but I cannot wait. I have wasted 8 years, and I will not waste another day." Beatrice's heart began to pound. "Warren." "Marry me," Warren said, dropping to one knee right there in the dirt, Storm sitting beside him like a witness. "I do not have a ring yet, and I know we have only known each other for 5 days, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, I respect you, I admire you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me, Beatrice Whitfield?" Beatrice looked at this man, this good, wounded, beautiful man who had somehow become essential to her existence in less than a week, and knew her answer with absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The ranch hands erupted in cheers, whooping and hollering and throwing their hats in the air. Storm barked, caught up in the excitement, and Warren swept Beatrice into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Beatrice tasted joy and promise and forever on his lips. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Jackson, with the entire ranch in attendance and Storm sitting proudly at Warren's side, wearing a blue ribbon around his neck that matched his eyes. Beatrice wore a simple white dress that the ranch hands had pooled their money to buy, and she carried wildflowers that Warren had picked that morning from the meadow behind the ranch house. Samuel Carson gave her away, and Dutch cried through the entire ceremony. The wedding night was gentle and sweet, Warren treating Beatrice like precious glass, until she finally told him she would not break and please just love her the way she could see he wanted to. They loved each other through the night, learning the shapes and tastes and sounds of each other, building something new from the ruins of their separate pasts. And when morning came, Warren held her close and whispered that she had made him the happiest man alive. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt like coming home. Beatrice worked as housekeeper but also began training the difficult horses, discovering she had the same gift with them that she had shown with Storm. Warren taught her to ride, patient with her city-bred awkwardness, laughing when she fell off and cheering when she finally managed to stay in the saddle for a full gallop. Storm became the ranch mascot, beloved by all the men, a living testament to what patience and love could accomplish. Beatrice and Warren moved into a small cabin on the property, 2 rooms that they filled with laughter and affection and hope. They talked late into the night about their dreams, about the children they wanted to have, about growing old together in this valley with the mountains standing eternal watch. And when winter came, fierce and cold, they stayed warm in each other's arms, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. In late February, Beatrice realized her monthly courses had not come, and her breasts were tender, and certain smells made her stomach turn. She told Warren over breakfast one morning, watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to absolute joy. He picked her up and spun her around, just like he had when she agreed to marry him, and then set her down carefully like she might shatter. "A baby," he breathed, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Warren said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You have given me everything I thought I lost, Beatrice. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with a smile. I love you more than I have words to express." Their daughter was born in October of 1885, a healthy, squalling baby with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. They named her Margaret Hope, honoring Warren's past while celebrating their future, and Storm appointed himself the baby's guardian, sleeping beside her cradle and growling at anyone who came too close too fast. Warren cried when he held his daughter for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he whispered promises to keep her safe, to love her always, to be the father she deserved. Beatrice watched her husband with their daughter and felt her heart overflow with love. This man who had been so broken had healed into someone stronger and more beautiful than before, and she had been privileged to witness and facilitate that transformation. Just as he had helped her heal, had given her a place to belong and work that mattered and love that sustained her through every difficulty. They had more children over the years, 2 sons and another daughter, and the cabin grew to accommodate them. Rooms added one at a time as the family expanded. Storm lived to the venerable age of 14, dying peacefully in his sleep with his head on Warren's lap, his eyes closing on a life that had ended so much better than it began. They buried him on the hillside overlooking the ranch, and Warren carved a marker that read, "Storm, loyal friend and guardian, who taught us that love can heal anything." Beatrice continued working with difficult animals throughout her life, developing a reputation that spread far beyond the Broken Arrow Ranch. People brought her horses and dogs, and even a few wild creatures that needed gentling, and she treated them all with the same patience and respect that had saved Storm. Warren supported her work completely, often assisting her, their partnership as strong in this as it was in everything else. Samuel Carson eventually retired and made Warren his full partner in the ranch, recognizing that the younger man had the vision and dedication to carry Broken Arrow into the next century. Warren proved worthy of that trust, modernizing carefully while respecting the land and the animals, building something sustainable and good. And always, he credited Beatrice with his success, telling anyone who would listen that she had saved him just as surely as she had saved Storm. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Warren took Beatrice back to the spot where he had proposed, where Storm had sat beside him like a witness. Their children were grown now, with families of their own, and the ranch had passed to their eldest son. But Warren and Beatrice still lived in the cabin they had shared for 3 decades, still woke up every morning grateful for each other. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Warren asked, his hair silver now but his gray eyes still as sharp and loving as ever. "When you asked if I would ever let myself be happy again." "I remember," Beatrice said, settling into his arms, her own hair more gray than auburn now, her hands weathered from years of work but still gentle, still capable of healing. "I was afraid you would say no." "I am so glad I said yes," Warren murmured, kissing the top of her head. "You gave me back my life, Beatrice. You and that wild dog who bit every hand on the ranch except yours. You both taught me that broken things can be mended, that hope is worth fighting for, that love is the most powerful force in the universe." "We mended each other," Beatrice corrected, looking up at him with a smile. "All 3 of us together, and we built something beautiful from the pieces." They stood together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, just like it had on that first evening when Warren had first told Beatrice she was extraordinary. The valley spread out before them, green and lush and full of life, a testament to the work of generations and the love that had sustained them all. And Beatrice thought about that terrified, desperate woman who had stepped off the stage in Jackson 30 years ago, with $47 and nowhere else to go, and how that woman could never have imagined the joy that waited just ahead. How she had come west expecting only survival and found instead a love story for the ages, written in wildflowers and mountain sunsets and the grateful eyes of a dog who had learned to trust again. Sometimes, Beatrice thought, the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes you had to travel halfway across the country and tame a wild dog to find your heart's true home. And sometimes, when you were very lucky, you found someone equally broken, equally brave, and together you built something whole. Warren pulled her closer, and Beatrice rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, that most precious sound. Behind them, she could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter bright and clear in the evening air. The ranch would continue, the legacy would endure, and at the heart of it all was the truth that love could conquer anything, heal anything, transform anything. She had tamed a wild dog and a grieving cowboy in 1 week, and in doing so had tamed her own wild heart, had found her own healing. And every day since had been a gift, every sunrise a new beginning, every sunset a promise kept. This was home. This was family. This was love in its purest, truest form. And Beatrice knew, with the certainty of 3 decades and a lifetime of memories, that she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here, to this place, to this man, to this beautiful, hard-won, absolutely perfect life.